welcome to this latest episode of Smooth Like Butter, Criminal Undercover. You're still not joining me in that?
I will never join you on that. You know that.
Anyway, I'm Eddie.
I'm Tammy.
And this week on this episode of Extra Smooth Like Butter, okay, never mind. We will be discussing, I'm so excited, the Twilight series / saga, which introduced the world to Bella Swan and Edward Cullen. Bella, an ordinary teen, moves to a small Washington town to live with her father and falls head over heels in love with the mysterious and gorgeous Edward Cullen, a fellow student who is harboring a dark, dark secret. I just want to say before we start, thank you, Tammy, so much. Are you ready to talk or take a bite out of the Twilight series? See what I did there?
Are you thanking me because I agreed to do this?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And you must admit, you enjoyed it.
Huh?
You enjoyed it.
Did I?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say yes.
Oh, you're going out on a limb. Okay. Cool. What'd you think of it when you rewatched it? Did you rewatch it like recently, or was it like you rewatched it and then brought it up that we should do it?
No. I have to say, I am an old school Twilight fan. And I rewatched it earlier this summer when it was back. Even though I own all the movies, I rewatched it when it first hit Netflix this summer, and it was by accident because I think I told you, like, one night I couldn't sleep and I was like, oh, let me just throw on Twilight, because after you get over it, you're like, oh, you appreciate it for what it is, right? And so I was like, let me just throw on Twilight. I'm gonna fall asleep real quick, and I found myself watching it, and I was like, oh shit, I'm supposed to be sleeping. And then the second one, and we'll talk about that one in a minute. So the second one did its job. It did what it was supposed to do. I fell asleep. But then after that, I found myself over the next couple of days watching the rest of the series. So yeah, but I recently rewatched it. I haven't read the book. I haven't reread the books in a while, but I've reread them several times. What about you?
I refuse. I will not. Will never. Like I would never reread Harry Potter. Like, I acknowledge the fact that Harry Potter is one of the best book series I've ever read. Finished all 7 books in 1 month, but I will never again read Harry Potter. Like, I'll never open up my book and just start, going through the story again. But I'll watch the movies again. So no, I will not be reading Twilight. Not at all. Because Twilight and Harry Potter, like, Harry Potter was like amazing, written story. Twilight was okay.
Yeah, like, I think after the Twilight phase was over, and you kind of took a step back, you could really, and we were just having a conversation about this. You could really take a step back and be honest about what it was. And in the moment Twilight was at the height, it was a crazy phenomenon, from the books to the movies to everything. Granted, Stephanie Meyer made a bag off of it. Congrats, she had a great concept. Not hating on that, but her writing was not the best.
No, it wasn't.
And so I think what actually sold it more than the writing is the concept and the story. The story was very interesting. I love the idea of the story. I love the concept, and it was something about it. But once you step out of that bubble, given time and space, you can go back and say, I can appreciate Twilight for what it is. I guess it was one of those pop culture phenomenons, and it kind of becomes like a cult classic at this moment. Because whenever you read, you go back and, like, when I remember when it first hit Netflix and it was like trending for that weekend or those couple of days or whatever, everyone was just talking about how horrible it was, but yet you couldn't help but love it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like, I will acknowledge you were right. When I dragged my heels on watching the Twilight series, because I think my opinion of Twilight, and I'm willing to acknowledge it, has been tainted by the negative reviews of Twilight. But watching the whole series lets me know I did enjoy watching it when I first saw Twilight. Like I was one of those people because Twilight came out in theaters when we still were doing midnight showings.
Mm-hmm.
Before they started doing that 7 p.m. showing, when we were still doing midnight showings, Twilight was coming out. And so I remember starting with New Moon, I went to the midnight showing of New Moon, Eclipse, and both Breaking Dawns because I loved the whole concept. Like it was, the writing may not be up to par, but the whole idea of the movie was really really good. It was entertaining. So I will admit I was entertained again because I found myself like I'm just gonna work while I'm watching this real quick. It's gonna play in the background. I find myself like turning to the TV and actually watching it because I remember like all the scenes that I liked, or I'd be like, oh shoot, that was cute when I first watched it. Like, so yeah, it was a little nostalgic as well on just remembering how people reacted in the theater for certain scenes and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, so like I said, and that's how I felt. Like, I put it on thinking I'm gonna fall asleep. The first one, I'm like, and it just kind of sneaks up on you, and you're like, oh shit.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, this from the pure enjoyment standpoint, it's like, yes, I remember what I loved about it. Now, the critic in me, when you break it down, you can admit that, yeah, it was not, some of the acting was not the best. Again, some of the writing was not the best, and but you can appreciate it because it's the first time that Robert Pattinson, like one of the great takeaways from Twilight is it gave us Robert Pattinson. We realized him more for, or we recognize him now for more than being, what was it, Cedric, who got killed in the Harry Potter
Yeah.
movies. Yeah, so and there's the Twilight Harry Potter connection. But yeah, so it gave us Robert Pattinson. Kristen Stewart, it launched her, let's be honest, it launched her career too. So it launched the careers of the two major stars. Everybody else has kind of had, Kellen Lutz has had a decent, career, television. He was on FBI Most Wanted.
He is
Um,
on FBI Most Wanted.
no, he actually left. Like the new
Wait,
season started.
what?
Yes, you have to watch. See,
Are you serious? I didn't know that.
yeah.
Oh.
Watch the new season just premiered this past Tuesday, and they have their own night because Dick Wolf is Dick Wolf, so it's called the
Mm-hmm.
FBI's, and it's a 3-part crossover introducing FBI International, and so it tells what happens to his character Crosby, and he talks about why he left the show, the pandemic, and I know last year was a hard year for him and his family. His wife had a miscarriage in which she almost lost her life, and then they have another daughter, and he wanted to go back to California, um, to be with family and stuff. So he left New York in the show. He said he may still pop in. Like, I will say, I'll go ahead and spoil it. The character does not die, so they do leave room. They do leave it open for him to come back to the show.
Oh, okay. Oh,
But
okay.
yeah, but other than that, Nikki Reed, she married Ian Somerhalder, and she doesn't do a lot of acting anymore. She has other businesses and stuff. But other than that, it launched the career of those two. But you really haven't seen much of anyone else. Taylor Lautner, for a minute, he did a couple of movies, but you really haven't heard much from them since Twilight ended.
I agree. So what I will say is, and this is gonna be an unpopular opinion, is after watching the movies, and I really, really focused on the acting, especially Kristen Stewart, because we talk about her all the time with her acting. And what I will say is that I feel she was disparaged for her acting because the script was that bad. Like the lines that she had to give were that bad. Because there were even moments I was just like, oh my God, you really have to say that? Like, I felt like it did not help that the script wasn't phenomenal. Like it just really downplayed, because I see from watching Twilight to now, she's had growth. She's had growth. I think that in a lot of ways, she's still judged on Twilight. and just people saying like, oh, she is very typecast. I will say that she's extremely typecast on she plays the same roles. So I think after a while she just started to phone in those roles because there was no challenges to her acting. But I was just like, she wasn't as bad as I thought in my head that she was on this round. I don't feel that she's as bad of an actress as I set it up in my head to be.
Okay, I can agree with that. I've seen other Kristen Stewart movies. I've seen her outside of Twilight, and I'm gonna say she's not the best actress, but she's not the worst either. I think for me, it's that
Better
universal.
than Addison Rae. I'm just playing. I'm just playing. Just playing.
I
Okay, go
think
ahead.
I think it's that universal facial expression that she tends to do, that
Yeah.
pensive look, that patented, no pun intended, that patented Kristen Stewart pensive look that she has. And I'm just like, okay. But I am interested because the Oscar talk does seem to be real, and they just released the trailer for the full length trailer for Spencer. I am interested to see what she does because it is continuing for those who have seen the movie. So we will see if this, if you know, if it's just because of the subject or she really does do well. You know, and I know Robert Pattinson after Twilight went out of his way to do a lot of indie films and to take a lot of different roles because he did not want to be typecast as the heartthrob or as Edward. And I was actually surprised when he was cast as the new Batman. And I've seen another trailer which actually piques my interest a little bit more. So my opinion on Batman is more open than what it was after the last trailer I saw.
Good.
So
because I am excited about him as Batman. So I'm excited to see what he brings to the role that's different from everybody else that has played Batman before.
Yeah. Still looks a little emo, but we'll see how that transforms. And one of the things I loved about it, and I did not know, is one of my favorite songs from the soundtrack is actually written and sung by Robert Pattinson. It was one of his original songs. He actually has two of them on the original soundtrack. And so he has a really nice voice, and that kind of surprised me, and it just kind of heightened my crush on the, back during the R Pats when he was just that heartthrob that he always shied away from. That was one of the things I was like, oh my God, he can sing too. So that was really cool. But I did like that. So if you had to choose, which did you prefer, the movies or the books?
Well, I don't remember the books.
You don't remember the books?
No.
So
I haven't read them since my early 20s.
Okay, so by default, are we going with the movies?
I mean, I just don't think it's a fair question because I don't remember the books and I didn't read the books.
You didn't read them?
No, I mean like I didn't reread the books. Yeah, I just don't feel like I don't want to honestly say that, oh, it's the movies because I'm not giving the books a chance because I'm not picking them up to read them again.
Okay, I get that. I will accept that. Gosh, I think I'm going to, and I guess because I'm more of a purist and I tend to like books better than movies anyway. That's why if it's something I'm interested in and I know it's an adaptation, I will generally read the book before I watch the movie. And it's weird. It's very few books that I can go back and I can read the book after I've seen the movie. So, I guess just from that standpoint, I will go with the books, even though my opinion is the same for one book and one movie. New Moon sucked. Was that the second one?
Yes, it was.
Yes. Book wise, movie wise, I thought that book was my least favorite out of all of them, the book and the movie. What about you?
Yes, I will say it was my least favorite. But once again, rewatching the whole series, my opinion was tainted of New Moon. I mean, I have not actually sat down and watched the Twilight movies in years, in years. So a lot of my opinion was based on a younger mindset of, and also listening to other people's opinions. But really, I went into this, I'm watching it this time with a very, very open mind. Like, I am really going to give it a chance. And that's why I was like, oh, I can appreciate it. Like, I can remember me enjoying watching these movies and not feeling that they were as bad as people said. But I just said they were bad just because I was following the crowd, y'all. So while New Moon is my least favorite, it's not as bad as I thought it was. Like, I can delete some unnecessary things. But I can also point out like some very, very important scenes that push the story forward. That if we didn't have New Moon, Eclipse and Breaking Dawn wouldn't make as much sense. So it served its purpose, and I can appreciate it more at, watching it now than I guess I did the original.
So we can say that it's a necessary evil.
Why are you putting out negativity?
Okay, I will call it a necessary evil.
There you go.
And I will say that we're the opposite. Go figure. I think in the moment, I appreciate it. Like I said, it's always generally been my least favorite book and my least favorite movie. And I don't know if that has to do with me being Team Edward over Team Jacob, and New Moon was mostly,
wait, hold on. Team Edward?
That's coming up. That's coming up.
Oh, okay, continue.
So I don't know, but and I agree with you. It is necessary because it does serve its purpose of moving the storyline forward. But in the moment, I appreciated it more than I do now. It's like, yeah, okay, I get what the scenes are. I understand, the parts, the plot lines that move it forward, but it was just so boring to me. Then, and even more so now. Like, it's not the story, and I can honestly say it's not even as much as it is about me being Team Jacob over Team Edward over Team Jacob, because I see the appeal. I understood the attraction between her and Jacob, and we can talk about that more in a minute. But I think, to me, it was just that it was so boring, and because the movie was based on the source material, because it was boring, and they tried not to stray too much from the source material, it just changed very little. I think that made the movie boring to me. So yeah, I appreciate them less now than I did back then. So I'm kind of the opposite in that. But yes, I'm Team Edward. So I take it you are Team Edward as well. EDWARD.
No, I am not.
EDWARD.
Really? We're spelling out his name?
With hearts,
no.
with hearts
Okay,
and flowers.
So now I would say I'm more Team Bella, right? It's just a feminist.
Yes.
Yes. And I would have liked if she took more control over her life and she was more independent from Edward. The reason why I could never truly be Team Edward is because she was never truly independent of Edward. Her whole life revolved around him, his family, and who he was, and her fitting herself into that whole concept rather than creating her own life. And then Edward comes around and supplements that life. Like, even as she had her own friends, you slowly see those friends fall to the wayside. They were only her friends because at some point she had to hang out with humans at some point. But like, so I could never truly be Team Edward. Like, it didn't fully 100% sit right with me on their whole relationship. Now, I can understand, I would say that in the end, Edward is more for her than Jacob, because Edward would sacrifice for the happiness of Bella. Jacob would never do that. But the chemistry of it, I didn't see as much chemistry with Edward and Bella as much as Jacob and Bella in the beginning. Like I saw more chemistry with her and Jacob, and then it slowly like shifted where you realize, okay, she's gonna end up with Jacob. So she's gonna end up with Edward. So I'm just gonna have to fall in line with that. But she was never truly independent from him, so I couldn't 100% be behind Team Edward.
And that is the grown woman lens from.
No. And I can but you know what? I also had that concept when I first watched it.
Yeah. And I agree. And those are like two totally different conversations. But I agree. Just on the surface, from what it is, from the way it's written, from the whole fandom, I agree. I was team Edward. I understood the appeal of Jacob. I understood the attraction between her and Jacob. I saw where it came from. I saw that it was this natural thing, this bond, but I always thought it was more of a best friend thing. And I agree with everything else you just said. Even when I read it, and I love the story, I love the concept, I love the whole idea of that, because I'm a romantic at heart. I am. I believe in true love. I believe in love at first sight. I believe it's really rare, but I do believe that it can happen. So I think those stories kind of appeal to the romantic in me. Um, you know, but I also agree with what you said. There were parts that have never sat right with me, and the fact that it was always being. So when I say I'm Team Jacob, I mean Team Edward. I don't know why I keep saying Jacob. When I say I'm Team Edward, I mean from the fact of who she was supposed to be with. Now,
Yes.
did I not think that that relationship had issues? Some things that, some warning signs, some red flags. Like, no, I did not like how everything. I get that, yes, this is your first love, your true love, and I get that it's quote unquote all consuming. But dude, I'm with you. She gave up way too much,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just like everything was about him. And that is the one thing that and I think we talked about it in another episode about something else. It falls into that trope that I hate, um, is that women, when we fall in love with someone, we have to give up everything. Like they become every part of our life. And we wrap ourselves into fits trying to fit into their life. Like we'll give up every piece of us to fit into their life. Even if it's not a great fit, we still try to force ourselves in there. So that part never sat well with me either. And then as an adult, it becomes more and then when you start looking at it through that adult lens or that grown woman lens, because I was an adult when I read it, in a different mindset, in a different space. But it does become through that grown woman lens. You're just like, dude, on some aspects, y'all's relationship was toxic.
It was. And so another thing is I'm very, very shallow in the reason why during this whole life of Twilight, when it first came out, that I was Team Jacob. And the reason why is because Jacob had a better body. So no. Like I was watching it and I still remember when Jacob first showed up in New Moon with his new body and the whole entire theater went buck wild. Like it was like, oh my God, ah! Like we were screaming like crazy.
Yeah, like,
when he showed up. And then when Edward goes to reveal his scrawny ass body, and we was like, put it back on. Like I remember like, and that goes through the whole series is Jacob just had a better body. Like he worked it out. Like he had that amazing body. So from then on, whenever he showed up the first time, everybody was always so excited just because like he really like formed his body for this role. So I think maybe that was a little bit shallow of me to be Team Jacob because he had an amazing body.
Yeah, I can appreciate the Taylor Lautner's transformation to keep the role. Plus, the whole cast was like riding for him to remain Jacob, because of when he transforms into the wolf, his body automatically was supposed to become more muscular. And you did see the transition between him at when he first got the role in the original series and in New Moon. So I will ask this. What was your favorite movie? If you're not in a position to compare it to books and movies,
So
what was your favorite movie?
Yeah, no, because I thought about this. So originally, I would say before I rewatched it, I would automatically tell you it was Eclipse.
Mm-hmm.
I loved Eclipse. And then rewatching the whole series back to back, every movie back to back, I have to change my mind. Breaking Dawn Part 1 slowly eased into the number one spot. Not slowly, eased it in just a little bit. Like it just surpassed Eclipse. Because rewatching, I was just like, oh yeah, I think this is my favorite one. Like I could rewatch Eclipse. I just love it. Because Eclipse was her realizing what Edward and Jacob and everybody around her already knew. And so I think there was a lot of character development in Eclipse. I saw a lot of character development in Eclipse. But Breaking Dawn Part 1, I really, really enjoyed watching that one.
Yeah. Um, and I did love, and I think, and I get what you're saying. If we're on the same page, Eclipse is when she really starts to come into her own, and she
Yeah.
starts to stand up for herself a little bit more, and she starts to put boundaries between Edward and Jacob and let them know, hey, you're both in my life, and this is how it's going to be.
And she chooses, I'm sorry, like she chooses to, because Eclipse is also the movie where she was just like, okay, we're gonna do a vote. Like I am going to be a vampire, and Edward tries to like jump in that, and she's like, shut up.
Yeah.
Like I think she started that at the end, towards the end of New Moon, when she goes to their house and she's just like, okay, this is gonna be a vote. And then after that, him still trying to talk to her, and she stands her ground. And I may not agree on her wanting to give up, her mortality for him, but she stood her ground on what she wanted, even as he was trying to persuade her and everything like that. So I do feel like she became stronger as a character in Eclipse compared to what she was in New Moon and Twilight. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
I know. And I guess in her own way, just being subtle about it, I guess part of the just making me you're trying to give me a new appreciation for New Moon, but it just shows us that, hey, in her, that she can survive without Edward. Life would be different. There may be a hole in her heart that, something she never completely gets over, but she learns to live with, which happens with a lot of grief and trauma, is something you have to learn to live with. But so you can even say that a lot of that development starts when Edward is out of her life. But I still, and I agree. Probably the first Breaking Dawn would probably be one of my favorites, besides the original. Just the story, although I hate the differences. I agree with adaptations, and there's generally a rule when you're doing adaptations. The lesser known the adaptation is, the more you have room you have to play with the story you tell, or the way you tell the story in a movie or a TV series. But the more popular and the more well known an adaptation is, you have less wiggle room. And I don't. I understand you can't put everything in that's in a 300 to 400 page book into a movie. I get that, but I didn't like some of the way that they told the story in the first one, so that kind of bothered me about it. But um, I did like Breaking Dawn Part One. I would probably say that was probably my favorite, in a line with the original, just because it was the first movie in the series. Um, I now, speaking of Breaking Dawn and Bella coming into her own, um, I loved how they kind of wove or weaved in the part about how Edward could never read her mind, and how it was part of her vampire abilities.
Mm-hmm.
Her being, I forgot what they called it, a shield or
She
whatever.
was a shield.
So I love that, and it kind of gives you the sense that, I guess, for the people like you saying, she gave up her immortality for him, and she did it for herself, because we know that's the last thing he wanted. He just realized he got to the point where he had no choice, but he was trying to prolong it for as long as possible. But um, I what did you think about that connection? I was going to ask you something else, but okay. We'll start there. You know, it'll come back.
It will. Oh, that she was like like that. It
This
showed
year.
that her powers were already formulated on even before she became a vampire.
Yeah. And
Yeah, no, I will say that even though I hate how she sacrificed so much in order to fit into his life, Vampire Bella served a true purpose. Like it like I agree with her when she said that she didn't know who she was until she gave up her mortality. Like she didn't know who she was. She was literally tripping through life until she gave up her mortality. So I like the fact that she was a shield, and then showing her how to use her power in order to protect the people that she loved the most. Because the one thing that's acknowledged is that whether she was human or whether she was a vampire, the one thing that Bella did very, very, very well was bringing enemies together. she like people who couldn't stand each other brought together, like everybody formulated around her. So I guess it went where it flipped, because before she was a vampire, her whole life revolved around Edward, and I feel like when she became a vampire, everybody's life revolved around her. So her being a shield just served the purpose on everybody was willing to sacrifice their lives to protect you. So what is your purpose? And it shows she wasn't weak. Like she may not necessarily have been taught to fight, but she was not weak. And that was her way of contributing to the whole concept.
yeah, and I love that, and I wrote that down, and it kind of it jogged me. It made what I was going to ask you come back. So I did love how, you know, the final book and movie, she proved to be so much more than what she was. And I do kind of wish that her badassery would have extended to them actually teaching her how to fight. Like everyone else knew how to fight except for Bella. You know, the only thing they taught her, and I guess because of the time, they taught her how to use her shield power. So I would have loved to see that, but I do love that she wasn't just that. It turned out that she was something more than just the girl who gave up her life to be to so she could spend the rest of it with Edward. So I do applaud them for that, for doing that. But I do wish they wouldn't have downplayed it in some ways. You know, I think that in some ways it was downplayed, but you know, it's not coming out right. But yeah. So what did you think about now? How do you like how they tied up the connection between her and Jacob?
I hated it. Because don't I don't agree. I don't think, because Renesmee was not a thought in the mind. Renesmee wasn't, her egg probably hadn't even formed when um her and Jacob had that connection. I understand once she got pregnant and how she always wanted Jacob next to her. I can understand that concept, but I think it downplayed the fact that she did love him. She loved both of them. And what she said was true in Eclipse. I love both of you. I love you more. And that's ultimately what, is where Edward knew that she was always going to pick him, because he knew she loved Jacob, but she will never love Jacob as much as she loved Edward. So I'm like, okay, so that's supposed to explain away the fact that she was in love with two boys at the same time. Like, is that what you're telling me? That all of a sudden now is because she was one day possibly going to be pregnant with the person who he was going to imprint on and spend the rest of his life with. So, and I was just like, oh, okay. I felt like that was a plot hole, but that's just me. Maybe I'm thinking too deep on it.
No, you're not. And it was a creepy
Okay.
ass. You're not, because when I remember when I read it, I was like, really? Like I know so many people, and I'm going back to when I originally read the book. Now, in all honesty, I haven't read the books in years. I reread them like a few times, but I think as the movies were coming out, I would go back and reread the books and watch whatever movie was previous. Like, okay, but I haven't done it in years. But I do remember certain reactions to certain things, and even in the books, long before the movies, I'm like, this is bullshit. I hope they change this. Like, you know, because it just seemed really creepy to me. Like, I understand not the imprinting thing, but the way you imprint it, and then you try to change the whole imprint of what it meant. Like, I told you it means to protect, and I'm just like, okay, I get that you're protecting, but also you're protecting her because you know it makes it seem like she didn't have a choice. What if Renesmee grew up and she felt that she found her own Edward, you know? So it's just like it, yeah, it was just so creepy. And I guess at this point I'm digging too much into it, but that's just how I felt about it. I was just like, dude, this is creepy. I understand what I understood, and I really wish they would have let Bella kick his ass because I felt it for her because I wanted to kick his ass. Like, dude, really?
See, and I like the weirdest thing about the imprint is that how the progression of imprinting, right? So I forgot who was the example of the one who imprinted on a baby, and then when they were on the beach and he was just there and he was trying to explain how imprinting worked, and I'm like, okay, that's creepy. um and then you explain like, oh well, as she grows up slowly, um it's my purpose in her life is going to change. The concept made sense to me. Like, I understood what they were trying to do. The creepiness was in the fact that you could imprint on a baby. Like, that
Yes.
was the creepiness of it, was that you could imprint on a baby. Doesn't sit well. Even as the explanation was that it's not love, it's not sexual or anything like that. It is, because even then it's a disservice to the person as well, because that means that starting off you're going to be an uncle, and then as she gets older you'll turn into a brother, and then when she's of age you'll turn into the
A
man of
lover.
her life, her
And that
lover.
and
and
that
and
that's creepy as fuck.
yeah, and that's what I'm saying. So like that, I understood the explanation of imprinting. I get that. The creepiness was that you could imprint on a baby. You had no choice, but she, like you said, she also had no choice. And it's just weird on how you're telling me that those feelings for her, knowing that you're going to end up with her, would not develop until she's of age. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to me that those
None.
feelings wouldn't develop, knowing that you're ultimately going to end up with her. Like, you even saw the jealousy of Jacob being scared of the fact that there was somebody else like Renesmee,
Mm-hmm.
and saying like, oh, so she's going to live for a very long time. Now, they don't mention the fact, and I guess I remember something from the book. They don't mention the fact that Jacob can also control when he ages, and how long it takes him to age. He does not have immortality, but I do remember reading in the book that he can stay a certain age, and age extremely slowly. So the only thing is that you're imprinting on somebody that you're going to die one day, because you can only live but so long. You're going to die, and then she's going to have to find a new mate.
And it was just a whole choice, and she was a kid, and what happens as she, like you said, you saw the jealousy, and then what happens if she happens to find her own Edward or someone else, and it's like, so the whole imprinting thing, again, while on paper it kind of makes sense, like, oh, I'm just drawn to you and you're drawn to me. It's just creepy, and I really didn't like how, a it was weird that he imprinted on a baby, and like you said, just explained that whole cycle of how it was supposed to go with him and Renesmee. And you kind of see that because at the end he asked Edward, he goes, oh, can I call you dad now? And Edward was like, no, definitely not. And then when it does that fast forward to all of them standing by the water together, like with the grown Renesmee and Jay, I was just like, that's so fucking weird. Like, that is the weirdest happily ever after ever.
It is extremely the weirdest happily ever after. But here's the thing, and so somebody had brought this up, and they were like, so what are we saying about the fact that Edward may look like he's 16, but he's not?
Yeah, the whole that he was
Like
108.
Edward is an old ass man who's also a pedophile. He got with Bella, and Bella's a teenage girl. But everybody know, just because you look like you a teenager, don't mean you are. He an old man.
And yeah, it was just like that is also like I'm glad you brought that up. That was next on my list. So there were some plot holes in here that um that have me just like you have to think not you have to take it very surface because if you think about it, it's like yeah, Stephanie Meyer, what are you in your devout Mormonism trying to say here?
Woohoo! I forgot she
Yeah,
was Mormon.
so it kind of it just was like yeah, and that wasn't a shot at the Mormons. It was just like what are you yeah. So it was weird.
Okay.
I just can't.
Okay, so getting off of like the most popular characters, what about the secondary characters?
um
Who's your
I
favorite out of the secondary characters?
probably Emmett.
Okay.
And I liked Emmett, and I liked his God, I can't think of her name.
Rosalie?
The not Rosalie, the
Alice.
others. Yeah, I liked Alice. I liked all the Cullens actually, and I kind of wish we would have spent a little bit more time with them in the books as well as the movies. But I did. I loved their family dynamic, how they were all so different, yet they would come together. And Rosalie, I loved her transition, how she went from just hating Bella, and you understood. And then when she finally explained the reasons why she was so anti Bella, and then just how protective she became of Bella, how her worst enemy in the family, quote unquote, became her biggest ally, especially when she found out she was pregnant,
It was only
and
because she was pregnant.
she decided to keep the baby. Yeah,
Yeah. Because
but
Rosalie just wanted the baby.
so and I yeah. And in some ways, I get that it was YA, so it wasn't just going to be this whole thing. And I wrote down, I was like, I would love to see an adult Twilight follow up that is better written.
Now, that's not going to happen.
But yeah, so what about you? Who are your favorite secondaries?
So my secondary characters were all of the men. So I loved Jasper. I wish they had showcased Jasper's power more. On him being able to set the mood. And I loved Carlisle.
Yes.
Because like out of all the characters, I felt like Carlisle had the most interesting background. They talked about it a lot. They would mention like little things, but Carlisle had lived for an extremely long time.
And he
Like
was
a
a former
really
Volturi.
Yeah, and he was a former Volturi, so he had the like most amazing background that I would have loved to know more about. Not saying because there wasn't time, but and we did learn a lot about him just on him talking and other people talking. But I thought like he had the most like if they were going to do a prequel, I would want to see something about not Edward's life, but
Carlisle.
something on Carlisle, because I think he had the most interesting, and how Carlisle gets to the point where he forms this family of his own with these kids who, even as he turned them, considered Esme and Carlisle to be their mom and dad. Like it wasn't like this is just we're pretend, right? So I'm gonna do whatever I want to do, and then when we're in public, I'm gonna call you mom and dad. Like that's not how this went about. It was really on they were the mom and dad of the family. They were considered to be the parents, and then the rest of them were the kids, right? They were siblings. So I did love that. So I agree with you on loving the Cullens, because I love that concept of what the Cullens represented on, they chose their family rather than being born into that family, which was a little bit different from their cousins in Alaska.
Yeah.
Where the three of them were sisters, and then the dark-haired woman was not their sister, but she was someone who ended up joining their coven at a very, very early, very early on.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah. I agree with you. Because when you brought it up, Carlisle being a Volturi, how he lived to tell the tale after leaving the Volturi.
Mm-hmm.
And just like you
Granted, he
said,
didn't have any powers though.
yeah. And then him coming along, he didn't have any supernatural powers, but he you could tell he was powerful. Like, what was his
He
ultimate
was just a
power?
good. He was just a good person.
Yeah, and but the Volturi were not. So, like you said, we could create a whole story on Carlisle, just like how he left, how he was able to leave and
Yeah,
live to tell the tale and
he played
create
those
this.
politics very well.
Yeah, and so I agree with you on that, and I I gained a new appreciation for it overall. Again, like I said, it tripped me out how I thought, oh, this is just going to be a sleep thing, and I ended up over the next few days watching all of it again and actually being interested. Like, oh, yeah, this would be on while I do work, or this would be on while I do laundry, and I'm sitting here finding myself like, you're supposed to be folding
Mm-hmm.
clothes, not watching
And you
these
turn
random.
into watching the TV while it's on. I did the same
Yeah,
thing.
that I've seen before, that I've ragged on. So like I said, it's probably one of those going to be a pop culture cult classic, the Twilight series,
It
because
is. It is. It's up there with Harry Potter and Hunger Games. Like I can watch those. Like, I realize, like, I can watch them again and be just as entertained as I was the first time. Now, am I going to choose to sit down and watch them again? Maybe not. But if they're on, I can sit there and watch them and not feel like, oh, I'm just watching this because I'm forced to. So yeah.
all right. So is there anything else that you wanted on your list? Anything, any other Bella and Edward stuff we
Okay,
need
so
to take
what
a
was the
bite out of?
most, like, what scene was your, like, favorite scene?
Ooh.
Or like your top three, because it's over 4 movies. So what, like, thinking about it, what are your top 3 scenes from the series
Um,
or stories?
Gosh. In the first one, I love when they first meet. And I love the whole series of when, especially, I love the way it played out in the books when they're getting to know each other in that whole sequence. When they're getting to know each other, when he realizes he can't stay away from her. And so in biology, they're asking each other these random questions, and it's just so hard for him not to, talk to her and stuff like that. Um, so it's just the first one is, to me, I just love it, and it's the book itself. As far as New Moon, I think it's the scene at the end where you're talking about where they go vote, you know, after she gets
Mm-hmm.
back.
Yeah.
And um gosh, Eclipse. What is my favorite scene in Eclipse? Probably when they're on the mountain and she tells him, the conversation we just had about her and Jacob.
Mm-hmm.
I also like the part where she punches Jacob because she stands up to him too. Um, and then New Moon, no, Breaking Dawn would probably be when they're on their honeymoon. Although the wedding was beautiful. But I love the honeymoon, the whole honeymoon sequence, from them getting there to being on this deserted beach to them trying to figure out how they were going to be together, how they was going to get it in without Edward killing her. To the moment where she finds out she's pregnant and she's like, Carlisle, can vampires go in shock? And then Edward just gets up and starts like packing all their stuff, and then the housekeepers come and they know what Edward is, so they keep coming back to make sure she's not dead.
Yeah.
And then in the final one, I loved the okey doke scene, the fight sequence where we think it's. I'm like, oh, they switched it up. To kind, because I was wondering how they were going to Breaking Dawn up into 2 movies without it being boring, because there are parts that lull. And then I'm like, oh, the fight sequence, and then you turn out it was just a dream or it was a vision. So when I see that part, I do my biggie. It was all a dream.
Oh Lord Jesus. Okay.
Yeah. So that. What about you?
Oh my gosh. So in the first movie, I will agree with you on when he comes back and he basically just resigns himself to the fact that she's going to be the love of his life. Like, that's his person, so he has to deal with her sweet smell of her blood. So I do like that. In New Moon, my favorite scene is when she goes to see Jacob when he kind of goes through a dark 30 after he changes, and she doesn't know who he is, and then Paul changes, and then Jacob comes out to save her, and he changes mid jump. Um so like I've always loved that scene of like her running to him, telling him to run, and he's running towards the danger, and then he kicks Paul's ass. Um, so that's my favorite. In Eclipse, it is the mountain scene, but it's more on her coming to the realization that she loves Jacob. And it's not just the, oh, he's my best friend. It's, I really do love this dude, but her explaining to Edward, and Edward coming to that realization as well. So like Edward saying, I know, like when she says, I love him, I know, but I love you more. Like that whole conversation, and then the conversation of her and Jacob. Because
Okay.
with Jacob ultimate, I'm sorry?
No, go ahead.
Now I was gonna say what Jacob ultimately shows is while Edward is willing to sacrifice everything for Bella, Jacob is not. He still has an immaturity about him where he has this fantasy love for Bella, which is ultimately going to change. That's why I was okay with, I saw that her and Jacob were never going to end up together, because he wasn't willing to sacrifice. He was just willing, he just wanted to win in a way. He loved her, but he didn't love her in the same forever love that Edward did. So I saw that in Eclipse. Breaking Dawn Part 1, I would probably say the wedding scene when Edward gets Jacob to come and see her after he runs away. Because once again, it showed me ultimately he was her forever love. Because Edward was always willing to step to the side for her, for her love for Jacob. Like he may have hated it. He's gonna argue with her. He's gonna try to bully her into not doing it. But ultimately, he always stepped aside when it came to her and Jacob. He was always willing to let her go. And then in part 2, the scene that kills me every single time, even though I know it's coming, is when he kills Carlisle. When he snapped, what was his name? Oh my God.
Oh, the Volturi dude.
Yes. Oh my God. Argo is.
Yeah, I think so.
Argo. When Argo takes Carlisle and literally runs, snaps his neck, and it holds up his head with a smile. And I still to this day can remember being in theater and the gasp of everybody in theater when that scene happened. And we were like, oh, hell no, get him. The whole theater goes buck wild over the fact that he killed Carlisle. And so we were all on side like, kill him all, kill them all. And then you find out it was all a vision from Alice, which was really, really good. But like that scene of him snapping Carlisle's neck gets me every single time. So those are like my favorite scenes. Like, of course, I loved other parts of it, but my favorite scenes that gets me every time in those movies are those.
Yeah, you find out it was all a dream. Used to we would have stop. Yeah, and I think I found the perfect way to say it. Bella loved Jacob, but she was in love with Edward.
Okay, I'll let you get away with that one.
So I, the I love you more. So I get that. So
like, she would have like, I could have seen her with Jake if Edward had never come back. I could have seen her slowly falling for Jacob, but it would never be on the level of what her and Edward ultimately becomes. And that was the difference. It would never be that all-consuming love that she had for Edward.
I think she could have been content with Jacob. They would have had a very nice, settled life. But would she truly?
It wouldn't be passionate.
Yeah, would have ever truly just been happy? No, like there would have always been a piece that was missing.
Yeah,
that makes.
I agree.
So, all right. Well, you don't remember the book, so I was gonna say, where did you rate the books? I actually rate the books a 3.5 because I like them a little bit better than the movies. And I guess that's just, I explained it earlier, my affinity for reading, and I tend to lean more towards the book series than the movie series.
I I mean, I read the book series as quickly as I read Harry Potter.
Cool.
Like,
So, do you want to rate them? I was letting you off the hook.
I mean, yeah, like, I mean, if Harry Potter is like a 4.75, then Twilight, would you say a 3.5?
Yeah, I give it a 3.5.
The book series, because I really did enjoy the book series, and thank God that she stopped with this whole concept of coming out with Edward's version. Um, I can give it a 3.75. Like, I really did enjoy the books. Because even what I will say is New Moon was boring. It was. And it took me the longest to get through New Moon. And then once I got through New Moon, I read Eclipse, Breaking Dawn like that. But it wasn't as boring as, you ever read the Divergent series?
Yes.
Divergent was boring. It took me a year to get through the second book of Divergent.
Yeah,
A
it
year.
never it that just like the movies, the books, like they were interesting, very interesting concept, very
Yeah.
interesting story.
The
After the
first the
first
first book
one,
was amazing.
after
Second and
that,
third,
they fell off. Like
yeah,
they wasted potential with that.
so
So
much.
much.
So I would say, like, compared to the fact that it took me a year to read the second book off of the Divergent series, and New Moon just probably took me maybe a couple more weeks than normal. Um, I would say a 3.75. Like, I was entertained through the book series. I was entertained. I could, like, I when I went to see the movies, I was pointing out like the differences between the book and the movies. That didn't happen. That wasn't there. But yeah, 3.75. I can remember. I enjoyed reading the book series. I just can't remember exactly what the books, what the differences in the books were to the movies, because I'm not reading them again.
I don't blame you. Yeah, and my 3.5 is I love the books. Don't get me wrong. I remember especially the first one, just reading it, and like I said, the romantic in me. I love the romantic sentiment and notion behind the book, and that something about just that one true love at first sight that gets me just about every time. But the writing, the writing was just like, but yeah, so I that's why I gave it a 3.5. But kudos to Stephanie Meyer, because she's a published author and she's still making money off of Twilight. So
For the rest of her
um,
life, because she actually wrote the scripts too.
yeah, and I agree with you about and produced the movie. So I agree
Mm-hmm.
with you about not continuing the Edward story. Although, like I said, I would like a better written continuation of the series, maybe with a little bit more action and not so much drama. But so what about the movies? What's your rating? How many popcorns are you giving the movies?
Oh gosh. Okay, we're gonna do this all as one series.
Uh, However
Okay.
you want to do it. How do you want to
Nah,
do it?
let's do one series. Let's not extend it longer.
Okay.
So as a movie series, on rewatching the movie series and acknowledging the fact that I truly did enjoy it, even New Moon served its purpose. I can say I would rate it the same that I did for the books. Like, the book served a different purpose than the movies, and if it was years ago, I probably wouldn't rate the movies as high as this. But 3.75, because nostalgia, like it realized that it may not have been the best written scripts, it may not have been the best acting, but I was entertained. Like, I found myself pausing and doing my work and literally just sitting there and watching the movie. So it's better and it's more entertaining, and I enjoyed it more than I remember I did. So I am going to give it a 3.75 as a series. Now, if we were doing individual movies, it'd be a different concept. But as a series, I'm going to average it out at 3.75.
What would you give your favorite movie? You said Breaking Dawn Part One.
Breaking Dawn Part 1. Ooh, I really enjoyed that one. And this can be challenging, and I know people won't agree. This is going to be unpopular opinion, but I'd probably give it a 4.0. I probably
Okay.
give it four popcorns, because I mean, I'd even maybe go as far as 4.25. Like, Breaking Dawn Part 1 and Eclipse back to back, because I watched those back to back. 4.25. Like, I yeah, was not disappointed Was not. I didn't fast forward. I was not disappointed. 4.25.
Yeah, you know what? Breaking Dawn, Eclipse and Breaking Dawn, Part One, they serve to me as better sequels or continuations than Breaking Dawn 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Um, so I agree with you there. I'm the same. I rated the movies 3.5. Gosh, I went lower than you today. 3.5. 3.5 popcorns on both. Same reasons. I'm with you. I was thoroughly entertained, more so than I thought I would be. For me, for both, New Moon just ruins it. Like, if you would have asked me before, I probably would have said New Moon was not as bad, although it's never been my favorite. But now I was like, oh gosh. And to be honest, I think I fast forward through a lot of it, except for because, like you said, the scenes you have to watch. And so there was just like, okay. And probably at the scenes where they were just talking, I kind of was like, yeah, I'm good on this. So, well, that does it. Well, you know what? Thank you for taking a bite out of the Twilight series with me. See what I did there? See what I did there?
It was yeah, like it was good. I mean, like I feel that I
And
should
you were,
get a reward for this. I'm just putting out there. I feel like I should get a reward.
I'll give you an extension on a subpoena.
Oh, damn, Eddie. Damn. Like I was saying, like we could do one of my movie series, but you just gonna extend the lawsuit that you got against me. Jeez, y'all see how Eddie be doing me? Oh, goodness gracious.
That does it for this week's episode of the Popcorn Wind Down. Please be sure to listen, like, follow, and comment on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and or Spotify Podcasts. You can also keep up to date on the latest in entertainment and pop culture news, as well as other amazing kernels of pop culture goodness at thepopcornwinddown.com. That's it. That's the plug. Pop, 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 pop. As I stated, you're getting an extension. I won't even rub it in your face this time. Thank you. And until next time, I'm Eddie.
And I'm Tammy. Bye.
Peace.